Welcome to Driftwood Conversations. I'm Hillary Sloan. Today's guest is Cynthia Abulafia, a longtime yoga teacher and yoga therapist, an academic, and a devoted student of sacred texts in yoga and tantra. Cynthia's work lives in a place I don't hear explored enough. Not rise above the body, but turn toward life, toward form, toward beauty, toward what's real in here. We explore the transcendence bias in modern spirituality, the practice of immersion in beauty, and the idea that curiosity itself can be a doorway back to the heart. This conversation also moves through lived experience, what it's like to go through profound energetic awakening, how language and mantra shape the nervous system, and what it means to let difficult passages have the respect of being difficult without rushing to fix them. Cynthia has a new book coming out called Embodying the Goddess, and she shares a clear, grounded view of the divine feminine, not as a trend, but as a way of understanding reality, embodiment, and love as presence. Here's my conversation with Cynthia.
Cynthia Abulafia is my full name.
Thank you for reaching out to me. It's a pleasure to have you on this podcast. Tell me about yourself. Who are you? Where do you live? And what do you do?
I live in Santa Barbara, California. I am a longtime yoga teacher, yoga therapist, and I study the sacred texts of yoga and tantra, the sister traditions of yoga. I am an academic. I study the goddess lineages and the divine feminine. And I have a book coming out on that topic, on the divine feminine. Who is the goddess? What is it that we call her? How is it that we understand her? What does history say about that? And what are the sacred texts that describe not just the principle of the divine feminine, but also the body, the goddess herself?
Where did you study? Do you have a doctorate, master's? Did you go to
Yes,
university?
I'm in the process of getting a master's. I've been studying a lot on my own for about 20 years since having a Kundalini awakening about 20 years ago. I'm currently getting a master's so that I can study the texts directly with a focus on Sanskrit because I was reading texts, but it was reading through translation and finding that more and more frustrating as time went on. I wanted to read the texts directly. And as it turns out, a lot of the textual traditions related to the goddess aren't even translated at all. So unavailable whether or not you have access. So really learning the languages is how to begin to peel open those traditions.
So you're studying Sanskrit.
I am.
Wow, that's terrific.
Yeah.
That's hard. I have a friend that was studying that and Hebrew, and the ancient Hebrew.
Wow, the Aramaic.
Yes.
Yeah. I actually have it on my mind to potentially go into Hebrew as well, doing cross study, but we'll have to see how it goes. I might get pretty committed into the Sanskrit.
What texts are you studying?
I study the texts that are related to the goddess traditions. The texts that I teach are perhaps a little more available. The Vijnana Bhairava Tantra is one of them. The texts of the Trika lineage. I do have a favorite teacher, and I kind of feel a little bit like everything I've been studying has been getting me closer and closer to this one teacher who lived in the 900s. His name is Utpaladeva, and it's one of those unexplainable things that I love his work. I love what he has to say. I think that he might be the most brilliant philosopher that ever lived, if I can say that with as much boldness as, no, that's kind of a bold statement, but he really had such a profound understanding of reality. And the more that I can study him, I think the happier it makes me, really.
I think that's what it's all about right now is that place of real pleasure and joy.
I
If we
agree.
if we can find that, then we're on the right path.
Yeah, yeah. Joy and pleasure. I mean, it's funny because I studied the transcendence bias, this idea that only stillness is real. We've been sold this story in spirituality around going up and out of form. And we're even suspicious, I would say, in modern spirituality of joy and finding pleasure in things. And it's all woven into this idea of the transcendence bias that we have to be in salvation from the body or to take samadhi and go up and out of the body. And pleasure and joy are our birthright in a certain sense. And it's a wide inclusive, it doesn't mean everything has to be pleasant all the time, but it's a wide inclusive definition. But it's the turning toward form, really. And that's exactly what Utpaladeva teaches, interestingly enough, and his students. They teach that the highest practice is the practice of immersion into beauty. That's one of the
That
core tantric teachings of the goddess lineages, is the importance of beauty.
So there's a lot here, and I want to both understand it for myself and for people listening. So, how do you teach this? Through yoga or through meditations and workshops, speaking, writing?
All of the above, all of the above. I wrote a book on the topic. And I do teach in teacher trainings. I teach the texts, yoga teacher trainings. I give workshops. I speak. It's really the whole range of what you just named.
Okay, good. That's perfect. So I've studied spirituality, but in different directions. So this is a little different for me. I don't know. It's not as familiar.
Yeah, I think that it's not as familiar for a lot of people. We haven't really engaged in some of these topics for quite a long time. We've been so immersed in the let it go model. Let go of, let it go spirituality is what I call it, transcend, go beyond. And turning toward is really what I teach because I'm not sure I know how to let it go. I do know how to turn toward something. I do know how to turn toward the things that are difficult and chew and chew and chew and chew on those topics and then digest them and assimilate them into my body and become bigger, perhaps, and wiser, perhaps. But to me, that's more a process of like bringing into form and drawing into wisdom and assimilating. So it's the opposite of letting go, it's turning toward.
Okay, so you're talking about with your practice, it's about turning toward the feminine, the spirituality,
And the body.
and the body. That's perfect. I spent years trying to go up, and it
Me
just
too.
kept me stuck.
Me too. And I did go up.
Yeah, I did too, but
Yeah.
then I had to come all the way down.
Yeah. Yeah. For those of us, and I don't think it's unusual, I think because it's our nature, if I might be so bold, this is the body of the divine. This is the goddess and God together. And so I truly believe that everybody has transcendent experience. Oftentimes, as children, we have transcendent experiences and we forget, or we kind of blow past it, or we diminish, or something or another. But I do think that having those experiences is natural, probably woven in far more than people discuss or say.
When did you have your Kundalini experience?
I've had many throughout my life, starting at a very, very young age. The one that I remember as a real initiation was when I was probably about 12 years old. My family is Turkish, and I was in Turkey with my family, and it was probably 2 o'clock in the morning. I was jet lagged, and so I was a little disoriented. And my sister and I were up. She's quite spiritual as well. I have an identical twin sister and a totally different flavor from me, but still nonetheless she's very connected. And I remember having a very clear God moment where I everything shifted in my perspective, and I looked at the room I was in, which was a hotel room, and I realized that it was one thing, that there was one shining luminosity, and that the religions that I had been instructed in, I was going to a Christian school and I was a Jewish kid.
Oh
So,
dear.
you know, I had exposure to religions, many religions. I had to sit in church, a couple times a week. And what I saw through my eyes and through my being was not anything I had heard. It was, you can call it wall, you can call it bed, but it was one reality, one seamless reality made out of the knowing of itself, made out of the luminosity of its own knowingness. And that was quite young, and so I didn't really have the language, but I called my experience one, as a 12-year-old might. Um, I created my own little religion. And then when I was 24, I had what is a more classical Kundalini awakening with the rushing of the energy through my spine. It really blew through like a rushing torrent breaks through rather violently through a dam or a series of dams. And that particular experience never closed. So now that's been 20 years of navigating that particular more classic Kundalini experience. And I didn't actually even know that that was quite a classical Kundalini experience because I thought I was going crazy for the first 10 years. I didn't really talk about it with anybody. I know you've spoken about this before, so I suspect you know what I'm saying.
Yes, you mean that feeling of going crazy is how, oh yeah. I've had a lot of very physical experiences. I remember at 8 years old waking up from a dream and knowing I was reincarnated,
Right.
and then things happened after that. Some of them energies going up or down or
Mhm.
blowing my head off.
Yeah, it's interesting because nowadays when we talk about Kundalini or Kundalini, um, we talk about it as rising from the tailbone and going up. But in the classical traditions, first of all, Shaktipata is when the energy comes down. It's meant to come down first. So, like, it's a descent of grace that then goes back up. But, and this is so interesting, Hillary, when you look at the original texts on Kundalini, it's in this very early stratum of Tantra called the Nishwasa corpus of texts. Kundalini is described as originating in the heart.
Mm, that
It's
would make sense.
she's described as a sprout coming out of the heart. She's described as a coil in the heart that springs forth all of reality. I don't know, I still don't know where in the textual history she got moved to the tailbone. I have no idea how that transition happened. Because nowadays, when you hear about Kundalini, it's always like the serpent that's coiled 3.5 times at the tailbone. She's pointing upward, she springs upward. But that comes hundreds of years later.
It's interesting. So, what I did study for a while, I don't know that my spirituality has any form now, but what I did study was the Kabbalah. And there are things in that I'm far from an expert or could tell you a lot, but you know about the tree of life and it's reversed. Well, where the roots hit, where the roots of one hit the roots of the other is the heart.
Right.
So that would make perfect sense to me.
Yeah. I've been looking at the history of that image of the tree, and it goes through so many traditions and cultures, especially the tree that's upside down. It has very deep shamanic roots, and it might even predate the first migration of people from Siberia across and into the Americas. It might be a Paleolithic concept that goes back over 20,000 years of the tree, because you have it, of course, in Norse mythology, but then you have it all the way across in Polynesia as well. But this idea of the tree that spans, and that even in some traditions, the shaman climbs up, like the Odin, for example, would climb up the tree and give himself to himself. Isn't that beautiful?
Yes, yes. But wow, there's so much to figure out. We're gonna have to come back another time and after this is all digest. And also after your book's out now, right?
It comes out in 3 weeks.
Oh, terrific. So yes, we'll do a recap later.
Great.
After I read it, so I have more to understand. But Lilith, you know about Lilith?
Oh,
Lilith.
very little, but I do know her story.
So there's a whole tradition. Lilith was what I know is was supposed to be Adam's first wife. And there's a whole tradition about that feminine energy. I'm sure that relates to what you're looking at.
Oh, it must. Yeah. In fact, in the Jewish traditions, the goddess was part of the original Judaism. And at first, the scholarship was somewhat controversial, and now it's understood and clearly given that Asherah was part of the original pantheon, really, of the Jewish faith. There's always been a father and a mother, and it took hundreds of years actually for what you could call the tribe of Judaism to eradicate the goddess from their traditions. She kept coming back because the countryside people needed the goddess. What do we need the goddess for? She helps us give birth. She helps us transition. She carries opposites. She helps us die. So the goddess is really important for birth and for death. And anytime in the Bible you see reference to her pole, her ash pole, that's the goddess. That's her. They couldn't eradicate her entirely from the Bible. They did a pretty good job. They did a pretty good job. But they didn't do a perfect job.
Now, what's an ash pole?
It's a code word for the goddess.
Oh, okay. I've
Yeah,
never heard
it's
that one.
code word for the goddess.
And right now we are going into the feminine energy. Or
I
it's
believe so. I think she's waking up, and not just think she's waking up, I know she's waking up. You know how many people I when people are introduced and they say, like, what is it that you do? When I tell people I study the goddess, I usually think it's just kind of this odd little thing that I do and nobody's going to be interested. And what I've discovered in the last couple of years is it becomes kind of the keystone of the whole conversation, because I'll have people start telling me about their dreams, and they'll be like, who is this goddess? Who is this figure? Because when she comes to people, she doesn't come as some, like, um, I guess, uh, she's particular. When she comes in a very particular form. She always comes with icons, with this color, this many hands. This is what this goddess looked like. And it's always like, who is she? Like, which one is she? Now, I'm a non-dualist, so for me, it's the representation of the whole. She's both and. She is the particular, but she's also the universal. So, like, knowing which particular goddess it is that's coming to somebody in their dreams does matter because then you know who it is that you're engaging with. And oftentimes, it has nothing to do with your religious ancestry, your history. Like you said, we have past lives. So, when she comes, and there's a lot I'm seeing right now. I'm having to do a little bit of research on Mary Magdalene because very frequently people are describing her. And I'm like, oh, this is a tradition that I'm a little less familiar with, but let's see what's going on here because she seems to be coming to a lot of people right now.
I believe she's taken so many forms. I've got sculptures all out on my property, and I'm in Mojave Desert, and so it's a very interesting area. I mean, we could probably break that down in symbols, what the desert is. That's come up so many times in the Bibles, all the Bibles. I've always thought of it as the three, the Mother, Father, Holy Ghost, or Son. That, and I don't know how to describe that anymore, break it down. I used to be more in my head with it. It's just a feeling that all of them are important to bring them into manifestation. The Holy Ghost or the Son was basically manifestation. And the other two are
Beautiful way
more
to put it.
and the other two are more abstract, the Father being the most abstract, and then
So
the
then in
Mother.
that triad, who is the mother?
I suppose if I think about it as energies, the Mother is a different force. It's a much more collective force. It's a love force, where the Father is much, it's it doesn't come down this slow unless we can start to bring it into things we do. But it's very abstract,
Yeah.
the Father energy, where the Mother energy, I mean, if you look at biology and nature, and the feminine always is collective.
Yeah.
And what we have right now is a very masculine prototype. Well, it's been in place for so long, but it's no longer working. And I don't think it's bad. I think it has to be brought up.
You know what's funny is if embodiment is the goddess, then this has been her all along. I'll tell you the frame story of the divine
Okay.
feminine in the tantric traditions, and maybe this will help frame the language that I'm using. The masculine is considered infinite transcendence, so total stillness. As infinity, he is absolute stillness and absolutely unblemishable. And so the divine feminine, the goddess, is the principle where she is so in love with the infinite, so in love with the infinite, that she decides that she's going to give the infinite the one thing, her beloved, the one thing that he can't do. He can't limit or bind himself because he's infinity. And every child will tell you, you can't subtract infinity from infinity. You can't add, you can't multiply, you can't divide. The infinite is the infinite. So the divine feminine, the goddess, is the principle of limitation, of coming into limitation, boundary, and form, so that she can give the infinite the one thing he cannot do. She can give back to the infinite limitation and boundary. Now, when we think of it that way, that she's limitation as form, first of all, it's really easy now to like make her the bad guy, right? Like she's limitation, she's boundary, she's form, she's body, she's illusion, Maya, the principle of illusion is her. It has to be because she's limitation, she's logically impossible.
Well, isn't she also love?
Yes, also love. Yes.
And love it's such a huge concept. We keep trying to put it into words or shapes or, I love this, I love God, I love my boyfriend, I love whatever. And we can't do it.
Right. Right.
it never quite works.
Well, so there's this really great word in Sanskrit. It's hard to translate into English. It's chamatkara. And it's this word that means essentially like the savoring of bliss in the fullness of reality. So it's kind of like when you recognize that everything is love and without diminishing the terrible and the awful. Because when you recognize that in any experience, whether positive or negative, is absolutely full of itself, then that is a recognition or even a proof of love. For example, I'll just give an example. If I'm in grief, if I'm in true, deep, powerful grief, if somebody were to say to me, can't you just come out of that? Can't you just like move beyond that? It would be kind of a terrible thing to say. It's not possible actually to come out of deep, deep grief because it's so full of itself. It's so full with its own beingness. So there's this recognition of the fullness of the absolute beingness of whatever is present. And it's the quality of being absolutely full with itself. And that's what love is, according to the goddess traditions of Tantra. Love is the fullness of the presence of being. Now, whatever is on the canvas, whatever is coming up, it might be pleasant, it might be unpleasant, it might be terrible. But to be able to give oneself entirely to the saturation of that experience yields a recognition of love, even if, and this is where it's such a radical teaching on non-duality, because essentially the teaching says that if you're able to immerse yourself in the saturation of any moment, that you can recognize love in any moment without diminishing what's actually happening, without bypassing, without exiting, without leaving, but simply to recognize the fullness itself is of that vibration. It's a absolutely wild and radical recognition. And I've had this personal experience before, not in a terrible experience. I remember going for a walk some time ago, and I remember I looked into this yard, just a simple, like it was a house on the side. There was a sidewalk and a house in this yard. And all of a sudden the yard of this house just like exploded in love, where like the grass, each grass piece was like its own particular thing, but absolutely saturated with its own beingness. And this recognition of like, oh, this is full with its own self. This is full with its own beingness. And how is it that I missed this my entire life? Because here it's been this whole time that's the definition of love. And how small have we made our definition of love?
I'm laughing too because I had an experience years ago when I've always been into this and seeking. And I got back to New York. I'm from New York, went back at 18 and started working as a stylist for photographers. And it's a rather hard job. Spirituality in those days, we're talking about the 70s. It wasn't popular. It wasn't out there. To find anything, you had to go to occult bookstores and weed through the witchcraft. And what I found was this little blue book. I think it was Saint Germain that supposedly wrote it. One page said, "Be silent and know that I am God within." And it hit me so strongly that I walked around for days saying that to myself. And in this one moment, walking down Madison Avenue and 34th Street, all of a sudden saying those words, they exploded. And it's similar to what you saw. Everybody, everything just was illuminated. And I fell in love like I have never experienced before. And bits of it now, but it's a transcendent moment that you can't be in body and hold on to all the time. But then I realized, well, if God's within me, then God's within them. And I wanted to run around and kiss and hug everybody on the street. I was luckily I didn't do that because that could have caused a
In New
scene.
York, I don't think it would be welcomed.
I've had people when I've had moments where people came up to me and said, "What are you doing? What's happening? You're just beautiful."
Yeah, yeah.
So it does resonate. What you're saying resonates with me, and it also resonates outward. It is the vibration and the frequency of love.
Yeah.
And I
You
think, go ahead.
You know what you're saying, there have been some really fun mystics who've written about these experiences. Saint Teresa of Avila wrote that she was God's bride and that she was tended to, like irrigated, almost as a lover to God. And the way she writes about this as like a nun, right? A very strict nun is just this wild experience of life, essentially recognizing itself. And for some people I have spoken to, I have had this experience in meditation myself, but I'll say that I have spoken to some people in Kundalini awakening where their Kundalini awakening was recognizing that their selves were being made love to by God.
I've
Not,
had that too.
yeah,
I've
yeah,
experienced
yeah,
it too.
yeah.
I forget about it because you don't
Yeah.
talk about that very much to
No,
other
and it's kind
people.
of a wild thing to even, put out there. And also you want to be careful not to like give the impression that these awakenings are all bliss and rainbows, right? Because there's so much to it. You have to experience the whole span of it. I've spent more times thinking I was crazy and crying than I've spent being made love to by God.
And
But
we are putting this out publicly, so
yeah, yeah, well, I stopped censoring myself a long time ago.
good, good. I really think it's important to speak our truth, but also what you're saying is so important. I'm so glad to meet you. It's it is about everything, and I've been coming to that in my own personal healing and growth that if I don't love the moments that are hard, then I'm separating myself out from them.
Or treat the moments that are hard as curiosity. Can I be curious about this?
Hmm.
Because our tendency, and now I teach trauma-informed trainings. So trauma is part of the human experience. But what is trauma? Right? Like what is trauma really? What is the armoring that we've built around our hearts? And who's it really helping? Because our heart really thinks it's helping us when we put all the armoring around it and we experience some terrible things. And so then the heart does this thing where it's kind of like, okay, if I build some armoring around me, then it won't happen again. Or if I get really, really rigid, there is this young man that I spoke to who was many years into a spiritual crisis, and we were talking about beauty. And he was like, well, I can't experience positive experiences because I've experienced the void and everything comes back to the void. And if I experience something positive, then the law of balances means that at some point I'm going to have to experience something negative. And I was like, "Oh, that's a real interesting misunderstanding of spirituality. That's an interesting way that's a trauma response. That's not spirituality. That's a trauma response. You're making a bargain with life when you say, I won't experience joy because what if that means I'm inviting the bad? What if I'm inviting this great balancing of the negative? So we want to look at our trauma responses and what does it actually mean? And where is that armoring? And what's it trying to teach us? Because if we can get curious, now I call the divine feminine in the most basic terms, if there's one word for the goddess, it's curiosity. Because curiosity is, first of all, we're born with curiosity. It's our most core value of any living, we could even say living or non-living thing. Curiosity is our core value, our core experience. And then also curiosity is transparent. So anything that curiosity touches is amplified without being colored, as opposed to like if anger touches something, then that thing usually turns into anger. So like if I'm angry and I have a conversation, I'll be angry about the conversation. I'll be kind of like a little bit angry, like I carry the flavor of anger with me, but curiosity doesn't do that. Curiosity amplifies and it pulsates a thing. And I think that a lot of our conditioning and our trauma response is a shutting down of our curiosity. And especially our religious traumas are like, sit down, don't ask questions. You're not allowed to think for yourself. If you do, you won't be loved. Your parents won't love you. Your community won't love you. Don't ask the questions. It's a making of rigidity. It's a elimination of curiosity. And that to me is what the thread of the patriarchy is. It's elimination of curiosity. And so curiosity is pulsation. It's turning toward a thing. It's deconditioning. It's the deconditioning of the heart. It's also the de-armoring of the heart. Because now if I have an armor in my heart and a response on the inside, I can go, oh, I'm curious about that. What is it?
Interesting. The word I keep hearing is receptivity.
Mm.
I mean, in a way, you have to almost receive something to be curious about it. You let it in.
Yeah.
And I have a funny question. I haven't thought about this at all, so it's a little raw. But maybe what we've experienced is the patriarchal structure of the world for a very long time was a way of playing out how they saw God.
Yeah, it was also, and now here's where my own personal, really radical take on non-duality is, because to me, everything is the goddess. In form, everything in limitation is. So I kind of think patriarchy is her game. She kind of was like, this is such an odd thing to say, but I kind of feel like she just decided that it would be interesting to like eliminate these principles for a little while. Like let me just play hide and seek for a little while. Let me just disappear for a little bit. And I know this is such a weird way to put it. I think she's over it. I think she's sick of it. I think she's like, I'm done with this. I'm coming back.
Yeah, the universe is so big and vast, though. And of course, in our human form, we're always trying to bring it into something we can relate to. She, he. It's really hard to imagine the formless.
Yeah, the Father. Yeah. And those are symbols. These are binary words. They don't, it would be so wonderful if we could get beyond God and goddess and divine masculine and divine feminine. But those terms are still instructive. And I think that there's a lot of reasons, historic reasons, that we're not there yet. We do need to come back to honoring the language around the goddess as the feminine. And then at some point, once that gets kind of like integrated again, I think hopefully we can let it go. I know, like hopefully we can kind of like assimilate and talk about it maybe more as pulsation, like expansion, contraction, pause, expand, contract, pause. You could talk about it in terms of embodiment and transcendence, right? these bigger principles perhaps, but using those words are symbolic. They're words that are symbols, but they are helpful and useful symbols because so much of our conditioning and pain has to do with those symbols. So until we understand the pain and the conditioning in this word, this feminine word, I think it's still a useful term.
There's something about language that holds so much power. And if we can appreciate it without limiting ourselves around it,
Right.
being Jewish, being American, being Catholic, they all have a limitation, but they have an expansion. I was thinking recently, I've studied German. I'm Jewish and I've studied German and I love Catholic anything. I love Jesus. That's been my kind of finding myself in that mishmash. And I've been thinking about going back and studying German again, and I realize it hits different places in the brain. So it sends off signals and does magnificent things. So if we can look at language, any language, and take it in and let it resonate without defining ourselves strictly to its symbolism, if that
Right.
makes.
Yeah. Oh, we could have a whole conversation on language. And sound vibration, period. So when I was starting to learn Sanskrit, my professor said, Sanskrit's a very mathematical language. I almost call it like the physics in your mouth or something. Like it's a very mathematical language, highly logical. And it's all based on, addition and multiplication and weight, heaviness, lightness, rhythm, pulse. And when you start learning it, it does something to your brain. Like it reorganized. For me, it has reorganized certain things in my brain. I don't know, like after having two kids, my brain I was fairly convinced I'm never gonna be able to think in a straight line again. Like my brain kind of did the mom brain thing. And they're older now, they're both teenagers, but there's something in this Sanskrit journey where it's going beyond that. Like, not only am I starting to restructure certain things, but it's having an impact on my nervous system as well. And also, mantra, is not just core. Tantra is mantra. The traditions of Tantra are chanting traditions, and each text is teaching its own mantra. So that's what these traditions are. They're sacred sound traditions. And it's something in the sacred sound where the sound is the signature of the divine. And Tantra is not the only tradition that teaches this. I know a lot of people who have their own sacred tradition, but chanting and practicing sound, sacred sound, is a very beautiful practice, very powerful. My primary practice these days, even as a longtime yoga teacher, my practice is mantra. That's what I do. And I wrap myself in it. I wrap myself in mantra. It has changed me. And perhaps it's the 20 years of unmitigated, unbridled, like helpless Kundalini awakening that it took me this long to get into these sacred sound practices. But there's a whole yogic field called Nada yoga, which is the yoga of sound. Very powerful yoga that is beginning to come up again, I think, for some people. And I think that learning languages is a great way to get that same exact experience of the sacredness of sound.
You said you're Jewish and your family's Turkish.
Yes.
That's an interesting combination.
So my family were the Sephardic Jews that got kicked out of Spain in 1492. In fact, you mentioned Kabbalah. And one of my ancestors, Abraham Abulafia, was a very important teacher in Kabbalah. He was a rabbi and a mystic in the 1200s. Speaking of sound, he taught chanting, head movements and sound, sacred sounds, vowel sounds, very interesting mystic. He got excommunicated from Kabbalah because he said he was the Messiah, and he said that everyone was the Messiah because he said that God lived in the heart. So, and they didn't like that. You know, the religious leaders didn't like that. So when my family got kicked out of Spain in 1492, moved to Turkey, where they lived for 500 years. And then my father left when he was 35, married my mother, who's American. But I still grew up speaking the Ladino, the ancient Spanish, with my grandmother.
That's extraordinary. What a journey. And when you have difficult passages, times that are challenging, where does your resilience come from? Where does your knowing, your instinct come from?
When I have a difficult time and a challenge, I don't try to escape it. I I wait for that resilience to come after, but when I'm in a hard time, I'm in it and I let myself be in it. And then as the thickness of that starts to shift or change a little bit, that's when I start to bring in curiosity and curiosity around what is this? But I don't try to rush the process. I think I used to when I was younger. It created a lot of suffering in me to try to rush the process, like, oh, I should be able to move through this faster, or I should be able to, like, should be able to get through this faster. But now I don't rush the process when something's really challenging. I give it the respect of being there. And I have a lot of tools. I do believe in sacred friendship. I have a teacher, I have a spiritual teacher, I have a therapist. I have, like which is a kind of a privilege actually. Both of those are. And so, but I believe that we need each other as humans. We're social creatures, and to me resilience can't just be internal only. We work in community. In fact, I think we should bring back story circles and grief circles. I think that's a great way to move through and build resilience, is just the simple sharing of story, simple sharing of grief. That helps to build resilience, to know that I'm not the only one experiencing this, and we're not the only one experiencing this.
What is your book about?
My book is called Embodying the Goddess, and it's about what we're talking about, the non-dual divine feminine. I talk about a little bit about the history of the goddess, the history of patriarchal religion, and how that mapped through, what she represents. I talk about Utpaladeva's model of reality, which are the 5 layers of the heart. And then I talk us through the 5 layers. It's really 4 layers, but the 5th one is the integration of the 4. So I try to bring us into plain English, like plain language for these maps. And it's the map of the goddess according to this very beautiful tradition that I think understands the divine very beautifully. So the book is about that. And then the 3rd part is, how do you live in integration, in a state where you are able to turn toward, to make use of the mirror of life back at the heart? Because in these traditions, life is considered the mirror.
Where is the book going to be available? Online or at bookstores?
Yeah, it should be available everywhere. It's being traditionally published, so wherever that is, it's definitely available on Amazon.
And where can people reach you? Do you have a website?
I have a website. I lead teacher trainings. I I have all of the avenues, workshops, things like that.
Why don't you give us your website
Oh, it's my
address?
name, cynthiaabulafia.com.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I know. It used to be more complicated. It was like CynthiaAbulafiaYoga.com. And I was like, you know what? Forget that. I'm just going to make it my name. You add something extra to your name and you're just like, I don't remember.
Yeah, I know that one. This was a pleasure. I can't believe how fast it went. The whole
Yeah,
conversation. It's just like I looked up to check and it was, wow, we've gone through some time.
we've gone through some time. It's been really wonderful to talk to you, Hillary.
Thank you. Likewise, it's been enlightening. You actually put some pieces together for me that I'd been suspecting for myself. The curiosity specifically, and having to stay with something and not try to make it better.
It's so hard, isn't it? And that's a shame response in me, at least. I don't know about for other people, but for me, it's like I carry this shame where it's like if I can't get through this and make it better, then like there must be something wrong with me. Right? It's taken a long time for me to not believe that shame voice. And I still comes up. I'll admit it freely. It still comes up. And yet there it is again, and there it is again. But we're alive. And as long as we're alive, we're in process. And I think that's one of the greatest myths of spirituality, that there's this like line in the sand and you cross it. And, then all of a sudden you get launched into being this like enlightened being and you're going to go live on a mountaintop and like never speak again. And people are going to feed you. I don't know. I don't know what the image is in other people's heads. Maybe I have a weird one, but like it's always a very silent man. And then at some point I was like, okay, not a man. And also really, really, I'm not a silent person. So I'm pretty sure it's a really unrealistic image of perfection I have inside my head. So
Absolutely. But the whole idea of the way the feminine is coming in is very different. So the idea of allowing the pain, allowing the sadness, allowing spirituality to actually anchor the body.
right. Yeah.
I've looked at a lot of practices and this is new and I'm glad.
Yeah, and the texts are there. They're just hard to find because most texts are transcendence-based texts. But the traditions are there, and the more we can do to uncover the traditions, I think the more people will respond to it.
I have this very strong feeling that you also have your own connection. You don't even have to read a text at this point. How is that coming in for you, and how do you claim that?
I agree. I came in backwards because I had those direct experiences for a very, very long time before turning to text. And so I think I stand on that understanding. That's my starting point, that we don't need text. And yet there has been so much beauty and devotion in looking back on how brilliant people have mapped these principles in ways that are devotional, complete, complex, philosophical, rigorous. And there's something really beautiful in that. I think that we live in such an individualistic culture that we mistrust teachers, teachings, religion, and lineage. And can we do both? Can we honor the sacred within that's all around us and also look at some of these brilliant texts and teachers and lineages and say, wow, thank you for mapping this. That's extraordinary.
They've given you language.
Yes. Yeah.
They've given you language. I think it's Krista Tippett. She's a journalist. Do you know who she is?
I don't.
She's done this beautiful podcast called On Being.
Oh,
And
yes, of course I do.
and she studied, she went to religious schooling. I can't tell you exactly, but she went into religious schooling to get language.
Yeah.
Not to be
I did.
a minister or a priest, but to get language.
Yeah.
And I think that's brilliant. I love that.
That's what I did.
Yeah.
And ultimately speaking, everybody has a different path, right? But for me, the books have always come to me. I mean, I've had books left at my doorstep. I've had books appear on my bedside table. I didn't put it there. Like, I've had books appear in my mailbox from Amazon that I never ordered. The path of knowledge is my path. Things appear to me, books appear to me. They just kind of come out of nowhere and then there they are. So we all have our own path, and I think that I can honor other people's and still keep doing this crazy thing, thinking that going into Sanskrit is gonna give me peace of mind or something.
What I feel with you is an honesty. And so when you're talking about those books or scriptures or teachings, I can feel you integrating them in you, and then they resonate. This has been exciting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the conversation.
That was Cynthia Abulafia. Her forthcoming book, Embodying the Goddess, explores what we touched here today: the non-dual divine feminine, the turning toward path, and the heart as center of integration. You can find Cynthia's work, workshops, and trainings at cynthiaabulafia.com. As we come to a close, I want to say how deeply this conversation stayed with me. What Cynthia offers isn't a spirituality that floats above life. It's one that's coming down into the body, into daily rhythms, into the lived experience of being human. There's reverence here for ancient wisdom, but also a willingness to let it evolve, to meet this moment honestly, without bypassing or nostalgia. What moved me most was how freely Cynthia talked about her own experience. There was no performance, no distance. She was just willing to tell the truth about what she'd lived and what she'd questioned and what continues to unfold. That kind of openness creates a field where real listening can happen. It certainly did for me. Cynthia has shared about her work and her book in this conversation, and I encourage you to explore it if you feel drawn to it. But more than anything, I hope what stays with you is the permission this conversation offers to trust your own experience, to stay present with what's alive in you now, to let spirituality be something lived, not idolized. Thank you for listening. If this conversation touched you, consider sharing it with a friend. This is Hilary Sloan.